Welcome to the course, Disaster Recovery and Build Back Better. My name is Ram Satish. I'm an assistant professor from Department of Architecture and Planning, IIT Roorkee. Today, we are going to take some lessons from a very different geography of the world, from the South American side, from Peru. So, this I call it as lessons from Peru, and I'm going to discuss about information gathered from various resources. One is the earlier discussed version of Build Back Better, by Michael Lyons and Theo Schilderman, and as well as with Camelia Bono. So the earlier version, with that, there's a chapter on long-term impacts from the short-term recovery. So this is here what they did was they tried to compile a variety of cases in that particular geographical region, and they have looked at how people have adapted to it, how people have responded to it in different contexts. So there is also some other information we can see from adapting traditional shelter for disaster mitigation and reconstruction, experiences with community-based approaches. In all the discussions, they highlights on different modes of participation and different context and different responses to it. So this is Michael Lyons and Schilderman and Bono, Camelia Bono. So what they did was they have taken about 6 study areas. One is which are affected by different earthquakes in different timings and different parts of Peru. Number 1, which we are talking about, San Martin area, Alto Mayo, which has been affected by 1990 and 1991 earthquakes. Number 2, which is of Piura, Morropón region. In Piura region in Morropón, which has been associated with the floods, and it is not just only a one event oriented, but it is also the El Nino phenomenon where a longer term impact has also, like drought and other things, have also been seen here. Ayacucho earthquake, which is in 1999, which has affected the Chushi and Quixpilacto. Then you have the Moquegua earthquake in 2001 down south, and whereas this is about the Ica area, which is 1996 earthquake, and as well as in Ica Tierra Prometida, which is the relocation. So now in this we have the relocation context as well. So let's go case by case and briefly discuss about what they have worked on. So I'll discuss about the technological aspects in the first case, and then in because many of the things are common in all the cases, but there's a slight variance in different cases, especially with the Adobe type of construction. So I'll just briefly go through each and every case, and finally I'll summarize it, see what are the various generic aspects of it and the specific aspects to it. In 1990, in 29th May, Alto Mayo, which is this region we are talking at 6.2 Richter scale, and it has killed about 70 people and injured 1,600, and almost 6,000 homes either damaged or destroyed. Later, within 1 year, in 1991, again another 6.2 Richter scale have occurred, and this is why 40 deaths and 700 injuries, and the destruction of 466 homes in Moyobamba and 339 in Rioja, affecting, so this is all the Moyobamba and Rioja and Soritor. So this is the Alto Mayo region, and this has been carried out with the practical action group. And practical action group, they does mostly on the recovery process, mainly the long term reconstruction rather than the short term relief. So How did they accounted the beneficiaries? Obviously based on various surveys, various on the feedback from the local residents and the leaders. So they have actually calculated the whole expenditure of it, and as well as what kind of requirement the needs assessment has been done. And then they identified, yes, these are the potential beneficiaries. So at this point of time, when it comes from the architectural aspect of it, so with all the consultation process with the local leaders and various stakeholders within that region, so they have decided to discard the use of Ramdeath and Adobe, and they want to promote the Quince timber frame instead to be as a better earthquake resistant material. So what you can see is from the practical action groups, the model, they developed the plan with the timber posts in between, and they have, this is called Clincher Construction. So what you can see here is it's a kind of timber studs embedded in the, either in the concrete bedding or little deeper into the foundation. So then this whole wall, like we know the wattle and daub sort of thing. So we have this bamboo screen which has been woven, and then the first coat of slender is made, and then the second coat of slender is made later on the bamboo screen. So in that way, it has an intermediate vertical studs, and which have also having a horizontal studs, because you can see to nail it onto other two studs, and so that's whole very indigenous techniques. They have slightly upgraded this part. And in the first coat, what they did was, in the render, they first allowed it to dry, and then cracks have appeared on it. So when the cracks have appeared, obviously they made it for the second coat. That is where it can fix the second coat, because it gives a texture for it. So if you look at the cross section of the woven timber, so this is how it looks, where we have the floor level and about 300 mm height of height, and then this woven timber is fixed upon it. So this is about 2.3 meters. This is called, we call it the woven fill. And if you look at the detail A, this junction and this junction, so these are the two junctions. So now you have the 100 mm diameter, and this is, it is embedded, the horizontal stud is embedded within it, and there is also in the bottom, it have a recess, so it goes into the wall base, and as well as 50 mm diameter, so it fixed the horizontal stud as well. So this is a kind of detail it has been implemented. Then the technical group also have suggested various specifications, that concrete pad and strip foundations, which should have a mix of 1:10 cement plus aggregate, plus 30% of large stones, and concrete wall base, where it have mix of 1:8 cement and aggregate, and wood is structural quality poles. So in render, again they have mixed about first coat mud is to straw, which is 100 kg and it's a 50 kg, and second coat cement is to lime, sand, or a sieved soil as per the standards. So this is where 1:1:5, or cement is to gypsum sand. So this is again, they're all about by volume. And what are the benefits of this Quince constructions? One is this, they have upgraded this type of construction, also embedded the concrete aspect, the concrete foundations. They provided the concrete foundations, so which can give more stability, greater stability towards the earthquake. Then the wooden columns treated with tar or pitch to protect against humidity, concreted into the ground with nails. So this is what you can see here, and these nails have been embedded into this at the base to give extra anchorage, and use of concrete wall bases to prevent humidity affecting the wood and the canes in the walls, and similarly careful jointing between the columns and beams to improve structural integrity. That is where you see in the next slide, you can see that here, that the joining of the beams and the columns, how carefully they have done, because that is where it is going to tie the whole building in, and it's going to make sure that the whole structure acts in a better way in terms of the earthquake, when earthquake happens. And because when the canes are woven in a fashion, it will also not only the aesthetic character of it, but it also gives a kind of structural stability. And in terms of roof, there has been a lightweight, probably galvanized metal sheets roofing to reduce potential danger to occur from falling tiles. Earlier there were tiles or the Adobe roofs, so when the building shakes, obviously the stones used to fall down on the people. So that is where they thought of going for a lightweight materials. So what you can see is a community building in Soritor area. So what they did was they tried to upgrade this technology. First they did was they tried to construct the public buildings like schools or the community buildings, so that people get some awareness of this technology, and they could also train the local people. They could also give some training sessions or the masonry training sessions to the local people, so that it can be spread out to the other places as well. So the way they have developed is basically there's 20 to 40 people in a team, and then they start working on, they have got training, and they have been implementing in different sites. So this is how the methodology has been done. Now you have the identification of the beneficiaries and the first contacts. Then you have these, what is the characteristics of the beneficiaries, how do one figure out these beneficiaries. This is where the socioeconomics also play into the role, and the damage statistics also play into the role. And this is where the typology of plots, and now who will supply the material resources, that is where they have to negotiate with how communities can also provide some resources to it. The main issue is the transport. Like in certain places bamboo is not locally available, and they have to transport from raw materials from different places, and that is where some NGOs also have provided some kind of technical means. And this is where the training, and so first of all procurement happens at this stage, and identification happens at this stage, and the training and dissemination, and that is where they talk about the implementation process. And this is where they talk about the promotions, agreements with various NGOs and beneficiaries, and as well as the provision of materials, as well as how they have to really implement at different stages, and technical supervision, how it has to conduct at different stages. So this is how the working methodology has been developed. Now what kind of impact? See, this is one of this building, what you are seeing is the improved Quince building in Japalacio. And here what is the impact? From 1991 we move on to 3 to 4 years down the line. In 1994 it has about 558 improved Quince houses within that Alto Mayo province. And there are also, by taking the inspiration, there are many have been built in that particular province independently by both men and women. And in fact, in 1993, the national census estimated that Quince formed just 7% of the national housing stock, but within the project area, this figure rose to nearly 30%. So that kind of inspiration it has motivated. And about $1,300 it used to construct a 30 square meter house. And if it was taken by a brick or concrete house, it would have taken more than nearly thrice the amount, which is about $5,400, because which needs a skilled labor, skilled contract. But here the benefits for this particular community was because the skilled labor was also easily available in that region, number one, and the material resources, many of the resources, bamboo and all, they are all also available in that region. So the timber was available, the resources was available, the skill was available. So in that way the cost has come down, and people were able to participate in much progressive way. So the same case 18 years after, when the authors have investigated, so what changes they have looked at. Now one is gradually the drought in north coast of Peru have been consistently occurring, and that has caused affecting the predominant crops like rice and sugar canes, which needs more water, and also there is also impact on the water resources, and that is one aspect people tend to migrate to other places. And here again in this particular Alto Mayo region, there is an existence in the area of free land of a better quality than the land in the migrants' native area. So in the north coast area, so they are getting instead of 0.5 hectare land, they are having about 2 to 3 hectares land of it. So that is how people tend to migrate. And about 1994, when we see the migration, out of 4.3% of population growth, 1.3% have contributed for the migrant population. And considering these conditions, the government has motivated to and encouraged to enhance the production of the feasible cultivated areas. So that is where they have also promoted certain schemes, and they also developed and encouraged the people to work on the possible cultivated areas. So that is where from 32,000 hectares in 2003 has become 80,000 hectares in 2005. So it has more than double, and that has actually, the production has increased, and obviously the productions and the imports from other places has been decreased. So this is one of the important considerations, because and people are getting a better economic status. So they are able to now, in the beginning, though initially it has started with a very participatory approach, but now because the economic status is making them independent, and they are able to take some decisions. And earlier local government was not playing, but now gradually local government also have taken part of the whole process, and the economic status is actually supporting to that. But when we talk about the public areas, they are often neglected except a few main squares. Was what you can see is the main square in Alto Mayo, and which has been, you can see the secondary roads are not normally paved, and they don't have any trees or plantation except for the main squares. They have not concentrated much on the public spaces. So the migrants have also created problems. They started settling down on plots and outskirts of the towns, increasing their savings, and thus creating a demand for more housing and houses, because the more migration is started coming up, and that is where the demand of housing and services, and which means they're forming new settlements without any previous planning. And this is where one of the important aspect is deforestation. It says 1.33 million hectares have been deforested with this migration process, and nearly 27% of the total area, which comprises 27% of the total area, has been deforestation. And now that is where we are talking about the indirect impact on the climate change aspects, which may result in the shortage of water, which will again turn into a cycle of having an impact on the agricultural impacts. So that is a brief about the Alto Mayo constructions. And the second one is about the on-site reconstruction, post-flooding reconstruction in Moropan in Piura region. So again in 1997 and 98, there's an El Nino phenomenon, which about 9 months with heavy rain, floods, and changes in temperature, that has resulted in more than 85,000 victims. And Piura and 8,000 homes were affected. So because being an agricultural sector, this particular region is rich in its agricultural sector. So one is, in the reconstruction process, they looked at how to prevent the further water shortage, and dams have been, irrigation projects have been built. And also from the housing, the construction system with concrete foundations of 1 meter footings to prevent possible floods was built in improved Quincher. Again, they used the Quincher timber frame with the active participation of local population and materials. So even here the participation has been incorporated, and getting the local materials. Now here, being an agricultural family, again the whole idea of urban planning is to reduce the vulnerability and the centralizing water and services. And this is where all the housing complexes are built in about 200 square meters plots. So they have been also provided with certain technical guidelines how to use water, and promoting an efficient use of wells and water supply resources, and risk mapping has been done on the drainage studies, and they also identified certain vulnerable locations. So they have been also communicated to the people. This is how mostly emphasized on the water segment and the irrigation services aspect. Now what happens here. Today, in this, the situation here is very colorful and very cheerful. One is people have planted flowers and make their small gardens, and they also developed their own system adapted to the local conditions. So because they had a tin sheet, so basically with this advanced, upgraded Quince system, they have also adopted certain local techniques and they try to modify their dwellings. So that is where in any response, personalization is a very natural response to either to climate aspects and as well as the cultural deficiencies. So the fronts have been taken care of because they have painted with various murals with drawings like birds, mermaids, geometric figures. So this actually shows, they have made them private gardens into it. They've looked into the green concerns of it. This shows that the community's self-esteem has been considered very much, and that is how the participation have ensured that they have taken this self-esteem forward. I'll also discuss about the third case, which is an on-site reconstruction again, and post-earthquake reconstruction in Chushi and Quiospilacta, Ayukchuno. So this is an Adobe house. So what they did was they adopted, because being in all these 5-6 settlements, the poverty is one of the common factor. And here what they did was they tried to train them in making Adobe square blocks and train them in making these Adobe houses and how to make some improvements on it. And again, here also they consulted the people, what kind of beneficiaries, and they make involved in all the people in making these houses and everything. But what we see is there's not many improvements have been made in public areas. Like you can see, the streets have been gradually deteriorating, the stone parts have not clean and uniform paving, and ditches have not been cleaned. So which means this is where there is a negligence on the public space itself. But one interesting thing is people have invested the time and effort to actually to make this particular carved stone church in Quiospilacta built, because this is how one positive sign of it. But somehow it has not been taken into the overall scheme, how the same energy could have well better used here in making this. So this is one thing we can learn from this. So why does it happen like this? Because people have become dependent and have lost their dignity and self-esteem, because the state institutions have been providing them whatever they needed. So in that way, that participation aspect have gradually come down, and they are almost becoming mostly dependent, yes, on the state institution support, and either they are looking for any kind of external support or a cooperation. And the traditional form of community work was called of INE, which is a kind of give and take process in the South American continent. They have this traditional system. So that has gradually destroyed, and the efforts and actions and intentions of the development have been wasted. So despite of having this kind of energy, they were unable to invest that in holistically. Similarly, in on-site reconstruction, post-earthquake reconstruction in Moquegua, here it is also struck by, in 2001, it's about 6.9 Richter scale. It's struck by an earthquake, and almost 11,886 houses were destroyed and declared inhabitable. And here what they did was, again, they did about, again in all the cases the NGOs are coming into the picture, and they're working with the local governments and the local leaders, and they are able to map what are the list of the beneficiaries, how to provide. So there are 3 stages. They targeted about 195 families, which is implemented in Maricel Niato province between about 2001 and 2003. So in Moquegua 1, they constructed about 103 Adobe houses, and this is again in 42 houses in stage 2, and in the last one is a 50 concrete block houses. So here what happens is they have also looked at involving the community in the recovery process, and they also made some modifications according to their needs. But what you can see here is this has been very successful. But here, because of the mining aspect, so the local government also receive some mining fees, and which again it has been in turn used to provide the city services and make investments in the community. So the population, the community participation in controlling and efficiently planning the distribution of funds. So one is the mining being one of the richest economy, so it also supports to facilitate these services. And both the houses of concrete blocks and as well as Adobe remained in good conditions, and in both the cases it has been technically guided and they remained in a good condition. And this is where they also implemented one more. Indoors, the roof has been built with concrete truss beams. So they have this concrete truss beams, which are an innovation, and another innovation called tumba de lo, a cloth cover placed on under the lower part of the roof to reduce the heat and give a better appearance. So they try to cover a cloth under the roof so that it can reflect the heat and it can make the indoor environment a little cooler. And when people are participant in this, when the economy is giving support and the local government is technically giving in support in for a safer environments, so that is where the urban investments, what you can see here today is they are improving. The streets are paved and the civic center was built, public areas are pleasant, so and children playgrounds, everything has been taken care of. And this is where we see the biggest thing is the cooperation from the community. This is how it is continuing in this process. In the earlier case, initially they were part of it, but then there's become a dependent part of it and then they ignored it. So in this case it was continuing. This is another case, relocation, post-earthquake relocation in Nazca, Ica. The following case is also in Ica. So here also what they did was the similar patterns have been followed, and here the people have lost their initial, but today the situation is they lost their initial initiative and the settlements look generally neglected because mainly the promising land titles have not been defined. So the moment the land titles are not defined, that gives a little insecurity for them, and that is where they insecurity of tenure. People spend no time or effort in developing their settlement. When you know that the tenure is not with you, how will you dedicate some amount and effort to make that place better? And similarly, the streets have not been paved and the main squares has also been neglected. But the houses which here also they used this Quince technique and they are still in a good conditions, and there are also extension of the homes which you see in the other cases as well. And the last one is the relocation. In relocation of flood victims in Tierra Prometidia, Ica. So here the church was involved, the missionary is also involved in the relocation process. So what they did was they initially have been supported with the kind of temporary shelters and the transition shelters, and then later on the church came play an important role in negotiating and providing certain helping hand to make their houses in a better way. But then here, if you look at it, it is not the community who have not solved it. It is the priest or the church who have solved their problems by receiving a payment for the work they do for their own benefit. So which means the population does participate in the settlement, but they are paid for it. So it becomes a paid process. And this paternalism reveals a mistaken concept of charity, which has created an absolute dependence on donations, affecting the population's dignity and self-esteem. So here, instead of making them involved and realize the self-esteem character of it, here they have become dependent because they are getting paid for their own work. And in that process what happens is they almost accustomed to kind of begging. Tomorrow any problem comes, they are expecting someone will support them. So this is one lesson which we need to learn from this last case study. But summarizing, putting all together, is when we have all the disaster context, we have the loss of lives, which is a common context, destroyed housing, damages to services, damages to community education and health infrastructure, destruction of productive facilities, crops and cattle, disruption of local governments, because in all the cases there are groups which are migrant groups which have migrated because of terror aspects, psychological and emotional damages. But the underlying aspect, common aspect, is the poverty. But now in the last cases here, women played an important role in the recovery process. They have been being a participant in different activities, and they have been working in leading certain groups. So that is also one of the important aspects. So that is where here they address the diversities, local government's role, how they negotiate and how they bring the people together, state institutions. So of course we learned in a different way that it's also creating a dependency. NGOs who is supporting them, the church again who is paying for their own work, and the community agencies who are being part of this course. So there's all different actors working in this recovery process. So what are the brief lessons we have learned? One is, in the first case of Alto Mayo, we see despite of a huge participation process, but later in the long run, the better economic status have dominated this whole participation aspect. Whereas the individual and in the second case, which is a more of a positive aspect, in the individual and collective efforts of making their houses more beautiful and making their places more hygiene. So that is talking about the self-esteem by improving an urban image. Whereas in Chusi and Kusubita, participation was very active initially, but the people in general are not making any effort to improve their homes or their surroundings. It could be because of tenure issues, except for a SPU promoted by the local government, such a church, a carved stone example we see. They have invested time and effort for their self-esteem of that particular project, but they were not able to do it for so this is where the dependency aspect is seen more, which proves that the potential energy for developing the community does exist. These are some evidences which we can see that they have some energy, but we need to channel them in a right way so that they can understand and they can realize and they work towards it. Whereas the state institutions provide certain dependency aspect, and this definitely have an impact on the self-esteem, which in the last two cases which we have seen. And participation of women is very significant in this process. The change is happening, the leadership qualities are changing, the role of women is very different in this process. I hope this has given you a brief understanding what happens in Peru in different contexts and what are the long-term impacts for the short-term recovery process. I think that will help you. Thank you.